What's up, Z League? We have made it to 2025. We got through the 2024 season, we got through the 2024 year, for better or worse, and the league carries on. We wanted to make a video here to kind of showcase what we want to do with the following year. We went through the survey for your guys' feedback on how the season went, what you thought of the various events and the formats that we used, how NZ's doing, how the meta's doing, things like that. We got some fantastic feedback. We got a ton of surveys back with great detailed answers. I cannot thank you guys enough for the detail you put into working on those. So thank you. We spoke, the design team, the sort of admin team of the league here, we talked about how this information, what to do with this information and how to apply it going forward to our to future years, including this 2025 season. We're starting, in the very near future here. So this video, as opposed to doing like a town hall like we did last year, where everyone just sort of open forum talked about it and we didn't really quite get anywhere, we decided this time it would be better to just kind of really drill down on what our decisions were going to be, make them, and then present them to you guys in a way that's more digestible and easier to just run with. So this Z League 2025 season update slideshow is going to serve to represent those choices, the decisions we've made, and the changes that will come to follow as the season proceeds. So getting right into it, first off, the 2024 season itself was fantastic. We're in the middle of Worlds right now, or almost done. We're right about to the finals. We're on as of the date of this recording, we're working on the finals of the standard and tough enough event, as well as going into the grand finals, which will follow right after that. And then we'll have our world champion for 2024. That's fantastic. The format was awesome. We did the simultaneous standard and tough enough event. Everyone did a great job of getting their matches done on time, especially with the holidays. The feedback from you guys on the survey seems to indicate that you guys really liked that too. So we're excited that you enjoyed it as well. We're going to kind of stick to that kind of format going forward with, at least with next year, maybe the foreseeable years. But for now, the 2025 season at least is going to have a similar culmination in a Worlds 2025 setting, which will very likely have the two simultaneous events and then a final top cut. The qualifier format, like we did this year, where there were 10 main events that you could play in throughout the year to get into Worlds, as opposed to last year where Worlds, or 2023 last year, as opposed to 2023's Worlds, which was invite only. You had to qualify in one of the 8 events to get your invite to play in the sort of invite only finals. People liked more that everyone could play, and so this year we did it free, open invite, everyone could join, and that was fantastic. People flocked to that. We have new players we've never had play a game. That's awesome, or at least play a game here, so that's fantastic. We had some old heads come out of the woodwork. We had repeat, regulars. Everyone was here. Everyone was having a great time. The fact that everyone could celebrate the culmination of the year without having to stress throughout the year about getting here was awesome. We're going to continue to do that. 10 events, however, does feel like it was just a little bit much throughout the year. It was kind of stressful sometimes just to get, it just felt like as soon as one was done, it was time to go again. We're hoping this year we're going to do 8 main events, which will shorten things down just a little bit and hopefully give us just a little bit more room to breathe between running around. So we're planning for 8 qualifying events for Worlds this year. Again, Worlds will be open invite, but we're going to continue with the power level setting that we used this year. I'll talk some more about that in a future slide here. But the qualifier setting kind of worked great with everyone being able to just participate in those events, and then Worlds finally being free. We're going to stick with that. Midwest Melee is also listed here. Midwest Melee happened this year. Our first, second in-person meetup. We had one in North Carolina 2 years ago or so, where a couple of guys got together and drafted some Saiyan Saga, stuff like that. That was a cool, great event. But this year we did Midwest Melee. We had 16 players come from various parts of the country to meet up in Iowa at First Turn Games in Cedar Rapids, my home store. and it went off without a hitch. Everyone came, everyone played great decks, did a great job. It went super smoothly. We got some great prizing, we got some fantastic video footage. It was great to get to play cards with people in person, and we want to do it again. The shop loved us. They loved having me host the event, so we will be doing another Midwest Melee. So that will be around again as well. So there will be some more that I talk about too, but just stay tuned for some updates on the next Midwest Melee. It was awesome to get to have an in-person event. I would love if we can kind of continue and keep kind of a recurring series of those going. Not a Z League specific thing, but I know the Score Warriors Gather group is also doing another in-person event. So it's cool that there's more than one in-person score-related Dragon Ball Z event happening each year now. That hasn't happened in years, so it's exciting to see. Getting into the overview for the 2025 season itself, first thing I want to talk about is power level. Power level was awesome. It worked really, really well. It rewarded players for playing and doing well, but it didn't force players into having to fight tooth and nail for that invite. As we saw in the 2023 season, towards that last couple of events, those events got really sweaty with people like really fighting to get the invite that they were running out of time to get. And it really kind of diminished from the sort of like fun this hobby is supposed to be. So we think the power level system worked so much better. However, there were a couple of bits of like numerical things with the power level that weren't quite right. For example, with like the tough enough events, if you got a number of overkills or kind of lined it up right, you could end up getting more points than like the winner, or things like that, where they were just a little bit strange. It worked really well for like a first try. We're going to kind of reevaluate some of those numbers a little bit. Keep the same system, but just sort of change the reward values a little bit. Some more details will come with that as we piece that information together too. We just know it's a thing we're going to do for the year, so stay tuned for updates on that. As far as the main events, I did mention on the last slide that there are going to be 8 of them. It mentions it again here. Biggest change this year is that the main events will be free. Every single one of them will be absolutely free. Anyone can play, no entry fee. Just open invite. So that's great, opens the door for more players. We do have, through the feedback survey, there are a number of responses that said their reason for not playing in events was cost. Not even that it was too much or whatever, it was just recurring. Didn't want to pay for just like tournaments or whatever. Totally understand that. So we think that it's going to be a more inviting play space to have free events. However, this does mean that there won't be like dedicated prizing per event, which is, take it or leave it, good or bad. Some people, like the prizing structure. The feedback survey itself seemed to say that most people were okay if we didn't have the prizing. So that I think is better for everyone, big picture. However, to spin off of that though, with the side events that we kind of host throughout the year, we're looking to do more unique formats with those. With the main events, we're going to do 8, 4 standard, 4 tough enough, kind of like back and forth like we did this year. But with the side events, we want to do more fun stuff. Right now, one of our regulars here, Nick, is hosting a side event where it is like team battles featuring like iconic characters. You can't share a Tokuwaza, you have to all play different styles and stuff, so that'll be really fun. We have been cooking up one with another league member here, Bradley, who's been keeping track of all of the MP cards that have top cut in the 2024 season, so that we can have like a special side event where none of those cards are legal, to sort of highlight all of the cards that didn't see the spotlight last year. So that should be really fun too, and so we're hoping to do more events like that peppered throughout the year. For those events, some of them will be free, some of them will have like an entry fee and maybe some prizing if someone wanted to donate something. Or other times, something we might do is have sort of a donation as your entry fee. One thing that's fun for Worlds, right, is to have some world champion prizing and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. Midwest Melee also served to have like great prizing, and that was awesome. I loved being able to do that. but that does cost money, and we were able to do that through the entry fees from main event, main events 1 through 10 this year. But if we're going to do all those events free, that funding has to come somewhere else. So we might do side events with like a donation-based entry fee where you can kind of contribute into the sort of league fund, and that can be used then to pay off Midwest Melee pricing or Worlds pricing, etc. Then, of course, Midwest Melee 2, Electric Boogaloo, perfect opportunity to just use a cliche phrase there, but like I said, first one was great, second one's going to be awesome. I am going to schedule it now for September 13th. It is the second Saturday in September, just like it was in 2024. It will still be at the same location, First Turn Games in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And there will be obviously way more updates on that. There will be posts, there will be ads, flyers kind of going all over the place like we did in 2024. Stay tuned for those. You'll see them come when the time is right. But I just want to make sure that everyone knows that's going to be happening again. It was so much fun, and I'm really, really excited to do it again. So, I said that there were going to be some changes, and one of the big changes that was sort of almost unanimously answered yes to on the feedback survey was the D bracket rule. So, as you guys would know, right now we're doing the double power rule for determining who starts first. Someone goes first, they start at 2 above, or they start at full, the other person starts at 2 above if they are double powered. That has proven as time has gone on to have gotten progressively worse for the game. It was sort of fine when Score sort of first introduced it, but as the game has gone on and power levels have risen, the brackets have gotten wider, so you even have weird stuff that happens where like both players can be in B, but still one of them doubling the other, and stuff like that just like doesn't make any sense. And so that system hasn't been working great. It rewards the sort of weak personality, sort of stasis control type decks anyway that have already been really good. It keeps them from being great. It also prevents it just sort of caps out what personalities you can choose to start with, because you know you're giving yourself like an actual disadvantage to have a higher level personality. Just because going second with no stages can sometimes just mean you die. So the D bracket rule is a little bit different. I'm just going to kind of read over this slide here. The D bracket rule, with this rule, everyone always starts at 5 above, and you always roll to see who goes first. The only exception is if one player is in D or higher at 5 above on the physical attack table, and the other person is in C or lower at 5 above. In the case that the person in C or lower, or in that case, the person in C or lower would go first. There's no double power, so there's no like 2 above and a full thing. Hero villain doesn't matter. You're always just gonna roll dice, rock, paper, scissors, whatever you kind of gotta do, random determine who goes first. But the D bracket rule, if someone chooses to play Boo or I guess now Janemba, and someone else isn't, and their opponent isn't playing either of those personalities, then you aren't going to see that player, you aren't going to have the double power situation you had before. That person will just go second. The other player would go first. If they're both in D or higher or whatever, you still roll. If they're both below D, you roll. Just keeps things simpler. The change prevents strong decks that use weak personalities from always going first so that they can enter right away. It also prevents high bracket personalities from immediately entering turn 1 and winning, because sometimes you can just with the D bracket thing, there's no sort of guarantee to first or second. There's no hero villain thing. It just sort of balances things out a little bit. The retro, the sort of previous group of people who kind of kept this game alive after Score ended everything. They had tried first implementing a rule where you always roll a dice to see who goes first, and that's just it. But as they found in playing it, that still really rewarded the huge power level personalities like Boo and things like that, where sometimes a Boo or something would just go first and still be at 5, the other player would be at 5. You would just go first and get entered on by a personality in D while you're in B, and then just get absolutely creamed. So they implemented this D bracket rule, which kind of helped mitigate that, kept everyone on a little bit better even playing field, except for the couple of huge outliers. And this was voted, as I said, almost unanimously for yes, we want to try this. So this year, for the 2025 season, we are going to switch to the D bracket rule. We are going to reevaluate how these changes will impact the game come June. Just kind of a 6-month check-in, make sure that like these changes have been for the best. That's the thing we want to, as you know, we want to make sure this league stays the best that it can. We want to make sure the game stays the most fun and the most accessible to the most players. And we don't want to just make a change, leave it alone, and then it like kill the game or something. So we're going to keep an eye on it, make sure everything kind of feels good, see how everyone's feeling about it in 6 months. If we don't like it, we can switch it back. If we're loving it, we can keep it. We'll kind of play that by ear and just see how things go. As you guys know, we don't make a ton of changes here, so big changes like this, we want to monitor. So, talking about big changes, ban list stuff, ban list restricted. As you know, for the last couple of years, we have been really hands off when it comes to making score changes. When the league first started out and kind of was just getting going, the previous runner of the league, Neil, implemented a change to Krillin's concentration and Piccolo and Heroes Gather, limiting those, as well as Piccolo's Multiform. Good lord, couldn't remember the name of that card. As well as Piccolo's Multiform being errated to remove the cards from game that it multiplies so that you cannot kind of keep looping those. Generally, we want to stay as hands-off as we can. We want this game to stay as recognizable as possible to players who played it in the past when it wasn't actively in print. So we try, as we design the NZ cards and things like that, to implement cards that will kind of help mitigate some of the pain points of some of the stronger score cards. Things like Dismal Future have been printed to help with answering like Broly decks and their like huge hand size. Decks that will sort of tutor cards out of their deck have become a little bit more controlled because of the effects of Dismal Future. Things like Freeze's Deception or Frantic Attack in helping with turning off or getting rid of some of the drills that have been an issue. Things like that are all cards that we've implemented as ways to sort of keep our hands away from touching any of the score stuff. In the 2023 survey, it was very apparent that people didn't really want us to touch the score things, just leave kind of things as we know them and just sort of evolve around it. So we've done that for the last year. This year, the survey responses, however, were overwhelmingly different. That the meta is not great. There are still a couple of outliers that are just overwhelmingly strong when full representation is offered to them. So we did decide to make a couple of changes this year, and I want to just get kind of right into it. First off, ban list cards. We have one of them. We've decided to ban Long Journey. Just the number of non-games that this card can create is huge. If a player draws this card early, it's a one per deck. It's difficult to search, whatever. So I understand that. But if a player were to just draw this, especially like a turn 1 draw for Long Journey, and play it, coupled with the other cards that this card can play, the setup, the sort of blowouts that this can create are absurd. The number of games, like mathematically, that have been won off of the back of a turn 1 Long Journey is huge this season. So it's just something that has kind of plagued the play space throughout the season. We have tried really hard, as we've talked about it, and what to do with balancing and stuff for this year, to kind of eliminate the sort of non-game situation, to try to make as many games as possible feel like you played a game. So in thinking about cards to hit and adjust, we really considered most what cards are creating a game experience where we sat down, we set our cards down. We did not play a game. You played a card and you won. That feels really, really bad. So we want to try to eliminate that kind of thing. Long Journey itself, just a really swingy card. Like I said, just getting to do it early is huge. Even getting to do it later is big too. But the fact that you can play it and use it right away means that you can get out your sort of control-based drills without having to expose yourself to being in combat, which is so huge. As you guys have seen from Worlds and have just kind of known for years, that the sort of orange control drill strategies are so difficult to overcome, and it's because they set up these drills that make it really difficult to touch any of their other cards to create these board states you just can't get through. Luckily, you can sometimes get around that by forcing them into combat, and they have to then play a Brothers in Training or something to get their drills to be able to play and set up their table. Long Journey, however, just says you just use this right away. You go grab some cards. You have to skip combats if you don't care. Decks that want to play this don't play combats anyway. They want to be out of them as fast as possible and as often as possible. So that's not any kind of real issue. So just the sort of insurmountable advantage you get by getting a Long Journey right away to get out caught off guard drills or drills to draw cards like Speaking with the King or things like that. The setup that you can create for so free, so quickly, it accelerates setting up those really brutal lockout situations that everyone, or most everyone, really does not enjoy. It's really unfun to sit down and just face this wall you cannot touch. And this card just makes it so easy to do that, and especially if they get to hit it early, it's just not a fun card. It's not a fair card. It's created a huge number of complaints and things over the course of the season, even the season before as well, but this season especially. So we've just decided it's finally time for Long Journey to take its own Long Journey onto the ban list. That then takes us to the restricted list. There are only 2 cards that we've decided to switch to Limit 1. Those cards are Caught Off Guard Drill and Black Weakness Drill. I know these are both huge changes, so I kind of want to just sort of discuss why we've made decisions like this. As everyone knows, Caught Off Guard Drill just kind of in your general whatever deck is kind of not a big deal. But Caught Off Guard Drill, especially when coupled with Orange Focusing Drill, and then even further in the Orange Modern Blue Saga Mastery deck, really just sets up this unbreakable board state. Caught Off Guard Drill, especially 2 of them, can name so many of the cards in your deck that can answer these non-combat walls, and then Focusing Drill protecting further. The Mastery then sort of recurring the ability to get more Focusing Drills, more Caught Off Guard Drills, whatever. You have to play so many cards in your deck that can answer this orange deck. And as evidenced by the game, the standings in Worlds, etc., that's just really difficult to do. Even with a ton of those support, even with cards like Deception and things that we've made, it's still very possible and still very consistent that these orange drill decks set up this play space that is just uninteractable. As we talked about non-games, the orange games are not so much non-games in that they're very long and you play them forever. So there is a game there, but there's nothing you can do. You just sort of sit there and watch it happen because the wall that it creates is so dense, and Caught Off Guard Drill is a huge component of making that happen. We've had people say oh, we should limit Focusing Drill to 1 or stuff like that, or just ban the Mastery. There's been a lot of different requests, but the issue isn't, those cards are really strong, don't get me wrong, but the issue really does come from Caught Off Guard Drill and its ability to then further protect those cards. It insulates those cards so well against the amounts, the protection that a player can play. 1 Caught Off Guard Drill will name the best card that you have to answer drills. the second Caught Off Guard drill will name the second best card, and you're now on to your like third or fourth best option to even try, and those cards are obviously going to be weaker than your best ones. So it's just created a really negative play experience, and we want, as we said, to maximize the number of games people play. So putting Caught Off Guard drill at 1 doesn't completely remove it as a option that the deck can do. It now still protects like its first biggest weakness, you know, but it doesn't cover then the second one as well, then leaving you into your third or fourth. So players have a lot more counterplay into this deck now, especially also in losing Long Journey. Those two cards together, being able to not Long Journey, Caught Off Guard drill turn 1 is going to open up the doors a ton, but then Caught Off Guard drill at 1 as well is just going to further reduce the amount of pure protection that that deck can have. And the players playing that deck can still use a Caught Off Guard drill to cover their biggest weakness, but can now have to be more careful playing against other decks that now have more opportunity to answer their huge impenetrable board states. And lastly then, Weakness Drill. Weakness Drill is less of an obvious impactor than Caught Off Guard drill, Focusing Drill, that kind of thing. But Weakness Drill 2 has just proven to just be really, really strong. It provides, as it says here, just a disproportionate advantage to hand destruction strategies. Having a Weakness Drill on the table means that a player is always going to have to discard their last card. They're never going to be able to hold a card and then try to sculpt into like a decent response hand the second combat. So they're always going to be entering with a 3-card hand. So they're then forced to do so because they're just going to lose whatever they kept because of Weakness Drill. So they're forced to enter with a 3-card hand. Your opponent then sets plays 1 black, just body destruction or something to block your attack and discard a card from your hand. You're now down to 1 card in hand because you attacked with 1 and discarded 1. And then your opponent can then play their own card. You just discard another card out of your hand. So you're set there just like passing over and over again as black just does its thing. As we've seen from this year too, black has been very successful. It's been very strong. And Weakness Drill really is a big component of that. It just forces players to make really suboptimal plays into an already difficult situation of hand destruction. And then it's just too consistent with the other already good black style cards. Like if you have a Weakness Drill on the table and I do something to get it off the table, and then you block with a buffer block to then pick Weakness Drill back up to play it again the next turn or draw more copies of it. It just creates this situation where you can almost be Weakness Drilled all game in some situations. Even if you're answering the drills, like even if you're removing it from or discarding it from play. I guess if you remove it, that's of course a little different. But a lot of drill removal will discard cards. And the fact that they can be discarded and then immediately just get brought back through other black cards that you're already going to be playing anyway, just makes this happen way too often, and it's just too oppressive in a color that already has great performance and the sort of natural advantage of hand destruction. It's just a card that we have found, like I said before, to really increase the number of like non-game scenarios where you're just forced to play these terrible hands into these terrible situations that just get you killed. A score is such a game of, it's not a game of like incremental advantage, it's seizing like the right opportunity, just going for it. And the Weakness Drill like doesn't give you the option to have that opportunity. You're always forced to just back foot enter because that's all the only option you have. So having 1 copy of Weakness Drill is like still going to let black do that, and you can still buffer block it back and kind of keep it going. But it means that if it gets removed from play, you can't draw another one, can't see it again. It's going to just kind of open up the play space into black hand destruction decks a little bit, and hopefully that allows the black decks to still have access to that kind of powerful effect, but not in such a dominant way. That's pretty much it as far as like big notable changes that we have for the year. There's the 1 ban, the 2 limit 1s, and the D bracket rule. We think that these are all going to be very positive changes for the play space. I know that there are a portion of our players who are like very classic score heads and don't want any changes made to the score pool. Of course, we want this too. We want the game to remain as familiar as possible, and we want to do that with the least possible changes we can. But with 240 cards printed for NZ now, 241, I guess, it still is evident that these top tier power level decks are still not capped enough by any of these inclusions to the game, which proves their resilience into even that many new options. It just is going to create a better space overall for people to play the game, for games to be more interactive and just less non-games, like we mentioned before. With NZ, we're going to continue to make cards that will try to, answer or support various strategies. There will be, of course, plenty of new things that come up in the future, but we're hoping, similar to with our approach to the changes that we make to NZ when kind of balance happens, we're going to keep an eye on these as well. Like I mentioned before, with the sort of 6-month checkup in June, we're just going to see if this has sort of improved the play space. These don't necessarily have to be permanent changes, but for now we think that they are going to be for the best for the league, and we're just going to see how this goes and see what happens. That said, we hit a couple of scorecards. We try not to. Sometimes it has to be done. However, there are plenty of opportunities where an NZ card shows up and is proven to be stronger than we had intended as well, or to do something not quite what we had meant. As I mentioned just a moment ago, we want to make sure that we are transparent with that as well, and that we are staying on top of keeping any NZ card changes happening quickly and keeping the balance of those as close to the sort of score power level as we can. So we have a number of cards here for the 2025 season that we have made a couple of changes to that we would like to clear up. So getting right into those, the first sort of 5 on the list here, Fearless Chop and Namekian Dominance both have a slight change to the end of their text, where it just says, with Fearless Chop, when your personality is not at 0, your physical attacks have a base damage of 6 when you use the physical attack table. Namekian Dominance also says a base damage of 4 when you use the physical attack table. These are sort of always the intended use for these cards. They're just sort of clarifying text because of the way that they interact with the new Nail MP that was released in NZ5. He specifically he makes your attacks that don't use the physical attack table do more damage. And as worded before, unintentionally, but as worded before, Fearless Chop and Namekian Dominance just made them have a flat damage of 4 and 6. So you weren't looking at the table. Our intent with it is that you would sort of see the table, see a 6, and that's what it would do. However, just sort of like with rule specifics, that isn't exactly how that goes. So we just wanted to tidy those up to indicate that that is exactly what they should be doing. They are just going to look at the physical attack table, see a 4 or a 6 respectively, and move on. Therefore, they would not then combo with Nail's ability to increase the damage of attacks that don't use the physical attack table, because they still will. God Key Ritual is one of the most requested changes all year long. People have been asking for it even outside of the survey, but it was requested on the survey a lot as well. We have removed your opponent skips their next attack or attack phase section from the God Key Ritual. Everything else about the card remains the same. Can't win by a PV, Bill 5, advance to your Super Saiyan God level, RG this card. Your opponent just no longer skips. So now you get to go to your God form, they get a chance to respond before you get to do something with it. Kami 2 and 3 have been changed. Really, their effects are basically the same as they were before. They just now say that the ball effect that you use, you can no longer play copies of that ball for the remainder of combat. In testing further with the stack, we've found that things like the Dende's Dragon Ball Quest and things like that let you loop the same ball too many times, and people were drawing just a ton of cards or getting a bunch of anger, like different things like that. And it was just creating a situation we had not intended for him to do. So in making it so that he cannot play the same ball multiple times per combat, it's going to eliminate those situations and just make him a little bit more in line with the power level we had intended. He can still play different balls, he can still use his effects different times or whatever, but just can't play the same ball again in that combat. 5 more cards that we've got here. 2 of them are the Masteries from NZ4, and both are pretty simple changes too. Black Calamity Mastery, the only change that it has to it is that when you play a card or use a card effect during combat that can discard 1 or more cards from your opponent's hand or remove cards in the discard pile, they mill 3. Before, it did not have to be in combat, and things like Black Weakness Drill, Red Kaioken Drill were just milling cards in places we were not happy with that happening in. It feels really bad to get milled for essentially damage when you're not even in the combat step. So that's something we changed to just make that card feel a little closer to how we kind of intended. So nothing really hugely different, just 2 cards that it no longer interacts with. Blue Enlightened Mastery has lost the parenthetical effect that it had before, where it said that your opponent's Goku Sensei wasn't relevant. The reason that effect was on Blue Enlightened Mastery was so that the Mastery would always be able to gain anger, not so that you could always lower your opponent's anger through their Goku Sensei, which is what it ended up being used for. So we removed it and just re-changed the text on the card to just say when you play a card that can lower your opponent's anger, you can raise it instead. Can just will mean a card that could ever do that, not necessarily right now. So a Goku Sensei, well, I can't necessarily raise your or lower your anger now because of Goku Sensei. This card the card I played is still a card that can lower anger. It just won't right now. So it will still be able to raise my anger. Additionally, the second part of the effect has been changed just slightly. If your opponent's anger is at 0 once per combat, you can raise your MP to its highest power stage and draw a card. Of course, that's the same, but it is tied now to that first part. So when you play a card that can lower your opponent's anger, so it still doesn't have to be, it doesn't get through Goku Sensei, and that you can lower their anger. But if they're at 0 and you play a card that can ever, if it just says like lower your opponent's anger on the card, and they're at 0, you can choose to instead draw to power up to the highest power stage and draw a card. So those have just been sort of clarifying changes, mostly for Enlightened Mastery, but it does make it more in line with what we intended its purpose to be used for. Blue Colossal Throw has a slight change to the end of the card. It says you may only play Blue Colossal Throw via Transform once per combat. This hasn't been an issue with most of the Transform cards because they don't really work like Blue Colossal Throw does, but this one specifically, one of the things that's sort of happening with it is people are kind of letting a few of them pile up in the discard pile and then getting to a point where your opponent has no attack or no block left. You pitch 1 card, play a Colossal Throw. Grab a blue physical combat card, pitch that card to grab a second blue colossal throw, play the blue colossal throw, pitch a physical combat card to transform the 3rd blue colossal throw. That is not the sort of play space we wanted that to have. We wanted you to, give blue decks like 1 extra big good card in a combat to give them an opportunity to draw 1 more powerful tool that they would need. 1 extra betrayal, something like that. But getting to loop the 3 of these into each other is not the intent, and we have changed it to make sure that does not continue. I'm going to skip Black Power Rush for now. There's a little bit more to talk about on that one. So Blue Power Throw has had a change to sort of the middle of the text, where it previously said when your opponent would advance a personality level, you can draw a card. That is proving to be A, the card draw isn't necessary, and B, the sort of likelihood of that occurring isn't happening as often as we kind of had intended either. So it's now been replaced with sort of the opposite of Blue Enlightened Mastery, where when you play a blue style card that can lower your opponent's anger any number of levels, you may raise their anger 1 instead. So for example, like Blue Sledgehammer lowers their anger 4, you can choose to raise it 1 instead. This card attaches to the Blue Trunks Saga Mastery, which the cool thing that Mastery does is that it lets you raise your anger, or raise your opponent's anger. So building their anger up, trying to keep them at like that kind of 3-4 window is great. And so letting this give you, let you push them up just a little bit further to get a little bit more damage out of it. Now you can choose to perform an attack, raise their anger 1 with, instead of lowering it, you can choose to then lower it again with the power from your mastery, or you can choose to raise it to go up 2. It just gives you a little bit more control forward and back of keeping their power level or their anger at the level you kind of like it to be to get the most damage out of this that you can. Obviously, this having that much control of your opponent's anger is pretty powerful. So it's one that we want to kind of keep an eye on too, but we think that this is going to make this card perform a lot closer to sort of how we wanted the support for the Blue Trunks Saga Mastery, which is one of the weakest masteries in the game, to perform. Now, speaking of weak masteries in the game, the Black World Game Saga Mastery is one of the weaker masteries. The Black Power Rush card previously was an energy attack, and it had King Vegeta kind of doing that purple energy blast into that little guy. That mastery says that when you perform an attack, you have to discard a non-combat. When you perform a black-style physical attack, you may discard one. So the may, what was happening is if you would play the Black Power Rush as an energy combat, energy attack in that deck, you were running into the situation where you might even have to discard your own non-combat cards because it's not a physical attack. So it's sort of non-comboing with its own intended combo. So we switched it to a physical combat card. It still does the 3 life cards of damage that it did before. Now it's just a physical attack. So now it allows you to may discard a card as opposed to must from the black energy attack you would have had before. It just makes it work a little bit better with that mastery. Couple more. The Crusher Core. I am guilty of this deck myself. I've played this one a ton this year. We've had other people try the Turles kind of package out as well. And the Crusher Core has proven to just be, as we've talked about so much with this thing, the non-games that this creates are pretty big. You start the game, you South Kai Crusher Core into play, you enter combat, Crusher Core plays Tree of Might, Tree of Might plays Depth Drill, and then you just run with it. It creates the situation where if your opponent's first 3-card draw is bad, they mostly just die. We don't like how that feels. Of course, that doesn't feel great for either player to just, oh, I drew 3 bad cards, I'm dead. Every time that happens in any deck, that feels bad, and Turles is just particularly good at doing it. So we've changed the Crusher Core to, instead of when entering combat, it's now at the start of your turn. So you can still South Kai this on your first turn if you wanted to, but you're now past the start of your turn, so you don't get your Tree of Might there. If you then pass to your opponent, they play their turn, it's not the start of your turn because it's theirs, so you don't get your tree there. It gives them an opportunity to enter on you to try to deal with your ally. If they don't, and it comes back to you, then you get your Tree of Might, then you get your drill or whatever in combat. And additionally, the rules say if you play a battleground or location in your non-combat step, you cannot enter combat. Crusher Core plays it at the start of your turn, so you are still allowed to enter combat and proceed about your beatdown business. It just lets your opponent have another turn of opportunity to try to do something about this before you get to fully set up the package and lay the smackdown down. Red Energy Misdirection has an incredibly small change to it. It says, if successful, you may raise your anger 1. Almost every time that we write anger on a card, now we say may, just giving players more control over their own actions. May was just not included on this card, and including it just makes this card a lot more functional. It doesn't force you to level, and lets you kind of keep yourself in a slightly better spot to sort of maximize drills or stay on a level you kind of intended to get to. Just makes the card more useful. Future Trunks Youth, his big thing, people don't like that he is, well, 1, unkillable. I understand that that's difficult, right? But Trunks, his most important thing is that he is present and sort of basically adding rules text to the future Gohan stack, so he kind of needs to be around. But what's different than him versus something like the Van or Celestial Halo, things like that, is that he's also an ally, which is not anything to ignore. It's a bunch of extra stages, it's somewhere to redirect damage, it's somewhere to perform extra cost or pay extra cost to perform attacks. So he now has been changed in his parenthetical to just say that if Future Gohan is your MP, this card cannot leave play, take control of combat, or have damage redirected to it. And it doesn't need to be in control of combat to use its power. So most of the rest effect of that parenthetical is even still the same. He can't leave play and doesn't need to be in control of combat to use his powers. But he can no longer have damage redirected to him or take control of combat, basically removing him from being an ally, quote, quote, for like purposes of ally mechanics, but still letting him be present all the time, having his effect be relevant. Orange Respite, as was seen in Worlds, is just kind of performing in ways differently than we had even tested to kind of anticipate. The card was tested a bunch in various different strategies, especially in orange settings. It was played a bunch with Gohan, but what it has been proving to do in ways that wasn't quite accounted for or experienced in the testing is like its quickness to draw Orange Vegeta's Assault, setting up quick turns like that, or even Orange Might, using Respite to pitch 0 cards out of your hand with Gohan, draw a bunch of cards, and then use Orange Might to pitch to just perform a bunch of attacks. And then maybe even your last card you have in your hand is a Vegeta's Assault, so you can then do the regular OVA thing afterward. It's just proven to function in ways that we didn't intend. So this card now says raise your MP to its highest power stage. You may place any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your life deck, then draw that many cards. Remove the game after use. So now Gohan can still use this card, but he does not get his sort of Gohan power bonus from not having to pitch cards for it. It still lets a player who drew a full dead hand put them away and draw again. They can pitch, they don't like 2 cards, they can put those away, start over, whatever works best for them. But this just eliminates the kind of abuse that it's getting through the Gohan stack. The final slide of NZ Errata's Dende the Friend. His only change is that if Dende is your MP, search your life deck for an ally in his actual power. Before, he didn't have to be your MP, you could use him as an ally. As we've been playing the game more with him and testing him out in various different strategies, having him as an ally, like if you're playing a Goku deck with Dende as an ally, Dende then searching out the Vegeta that lets you play Gogeta means that you can kind of Gogeta every turn, which has proven to obviously be way too strong. And it's just something that is working in ways that we just aren't happy with. So this way, if you do want to pull allies through him, he at least has to be your MP. The fact that you get them at full too means you have a full extra 10 stages. It's like a full power-up. So that's nothing to ignore too. He's just really, really good. And as an ally, he's been proving more and more to be too good. So making him have to be your MP at least puts a little bit more constraint on that. You can still use it to pull a Goku to do like Den Goku strategies. You can do it to pull a Goku and then later a Vegeta to still get a Gogeta. It still lets like those options exist, but it makes them much harder to do. Raditz Bad Company is another card that is just sort of setting up these games that are really insurmountable in ways that aren't fun. What he does, searching your deck for styled non-combats instead of drills, when your cards could look for drills, is very cool, but giving them all resist has proven to, of course, just be really, really annoying. So he no longer gives those cards resist when he searches for them. He can still search for a styled non-combat non-drill when you search for drills. He just cannot give it resist. He still prevents damage from focused attacks, which still is a super good effect. He's just a little more in line with kind of the power level we were hoping he would have. Toribot is a celebration of Akira Toriyama and his world that he has created in the game that we enjoy because of it. So his intent is that everyone can use him. He said before that villain personalities could play him, and that was supposed to kind of cover it. However, the one sort of thing that slipped through the cracks that we missed with him was that Majins can't play him. Now it just says that any personality may play Toribot as an ally, so he can be included in Majin decks. He can be in hero decks, villain decks, Majin decks, Saiyan decks, Namekian decks, whatever you want. Everyone has access to little Toribot. And finally, Namekian Key Volley. This one's not so much an errata as just sort of like a clarifying change to a card that just came out. It now says that damage from this attack cannot be modified, changed, or prevented. Now, I know changed is a little bit of a new word, but before it said modified or prevented, the goal and the vision of this card is that it does 4 energy attacks for 1 life card each for a total of 4. It's only ever going to do a total of 4. It's not going to do more. It's not going to do less. It's going to do 4. That was fine with every single card in the game, except for Energy Empowerment Drill, which does not modify the damage. It happens after modifiers, so it's just sort of a cap, but backwards. So instead of 4 life cards, this card was doing 24 life cards of damage, which is absolutely not what we wanted it to do. So we just kind of included the changed. This number is 1. It is going to stay 1. Nothing will change the number 1 on this card. All you need to know, all you need to keep track of, only real change to the card. It functions the way that we have ruled on it already. We just found in reading the rules that that isn't actually right, so we just wanted to do exactly what we intended for it to do. And that's it. That's the end of the video. I know we're pushing almost an hour here, so thanks to anyone who made it through this. Tried to get through this as quick as I could. There was a lot to talk about. Here's the 2025. The 2024 season was awesome. The league has been incredible. We gained like 200 members in 2024, which is crazy. We have more players playing than ever. We have a bunch of new faces, a bunch of great... The skill in the league has gone up a ton, so the games are getting better and better. It's just been a blast to see. So I hope that you guys are enjoying what we're working on to make this the best experience we can. I hope that you guys are enjoying it. I hope that you continue to play with us and that we get more new faces in here and continue to expand further. We're going to keep doing this as long as our hearts keep beating and getting us through it. We'll keep having, NZ released sets as long as people keep wanting them, to keep the experience as fresh and fun as possible. We're going to continue to do the scheduled main events into Worlds to keep the competitive scene alive. We're going to do the Midwest Melee type events to keep the in-person spirit going. There's nothing that beats playing cards in person with your friends. So we're going to keep that kind of thing going too. I hope you guys have so much fun here. Everyone here is my favorite people in the world, and I couldn't be happier being involved. So thank you for everything you guys do, everything that you are. Thanks for playing, thanks for being here, thanks for being understanding when rules things come up or issues arise. We do our best to fix things as quickly as we can and keep this the most fun it can be. I hope that the changes that we have made are not too discouraging to players. They are, of course, designed to open the game up to be the most fun to the most number of players we can. We are going to continue to try to stay as hands off of making score changes as we can. Hopefully this will be kind of all we need to do. It's really the only things we can kind of really think of that are problems in the meta, so hopefully this will just sort of balance things out and sailing will be smooth. Thank you. Have a great night.